Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Ryan, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. I think this is number 3. This is episode 3 for our 2021 season, and we're excited to have a slew of guests today. And so, for those of you who don't know, my name is Ryan Overton. I am a developer evangelist for Kentico Experience, and Ask the Experts is our show to let you, the viewer, come in and ask questions that have been on your mind about Kentico Experience, older versions like 11, 12, up to the new versions 13, and maybe try and pick our brains about where it's going in the future. So feel free to throw those questions into the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. And otherwise, we've got a nice set of topics along the way. I'm going to let everyone else introduce themselves. Sean, let's start with you.
Hi, my name's Sean Wright. I'm a solutions architect for Wired Views. We're a digital agency in Northeast Ohio.
Hi, I'm Chris Spess. I'm a senior developer at Wakefly. We're a digital experience agency out of Marlborough, Massachusetts.
All right. Since Trevor and I can't figure it out, I'm Brian McKeever, co-owner here at BizStream. We are another agency in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I am a Kentico Experience MVP along with Sean and Trevor.
My name is Trevor Pace, senior software engineer at Heartland Business Systems of Wisconsin, and of course, author of a couple different plugins that hopefully you guys are enjoying.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, and welcome, and thank you for being on the show here today. So typically we start off here, we like to look at a few of our community highlights here. Our first one, I want to make sure everyone knows and understands, Kentico Experience Refresh 1 is coming this month, and I didn't put a space where I needed to. Anyway, it's Refresh 1 space coming this month. So later this month, you can expect a brand new set of features coming to you. And I think you're going to like some of them. So I know our MVPs have one of the benefits. They've had an early access to play with it and give and provide their feedback. And I've heard some good things. So
I'm enjoying seeing the performance increases. Definitely. We're hearing more about that.
Is there anything that stood out to you guys about what you were looking forward to?
Well, go ahead, John.
Yeah. I was going to say there's some stuff that I haven't gotten a chance to take a look at, and I know some of the other MVPs have. And so I'm really excited to see what their observations were and things they noticed about some of those new features. I did get to dig in a little bit into the debug module for Experience 13 Refresh 1, which will be great for helping developers diagnose issues or just have deeper insights into their applications. It'll give you access to SQL queries performed in the MVC application and be able to see evaluations of macros and also cache hits or cache misses. So there's a lot of great stuff that's information that's happening in the MVC application, and that's going to be exposed in the content management CMS application. So you really get to know what's going on in your app. And this is something we had in Portal Engine, and now it's back for Experience 13, both MVC full framework and for ASP.NET Core.
Yeah, it's the same thing for me, Sean. I jumped. That was the first thing because obviously I have done the package with you for Kentico 12 MVC to try to bring some of that information to an MVC developer. But I was excited that that's now natively back in the solution. And that was the exact first thing I checked out. So I think we're on the same wavelength there for sure.
Nice. I obviously haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but how is the installation process? I'm excited to see how the new refresh is like.
So I'll say that for our beta testing, it's not what you guys are going to have to experience. We actually got a whole separate Kentico installation because it's a beta. But for the rest of everyone else, it's just going to be like a hotfix. So the normal hotfix solution, change your NuGet package, and that really should be it. So that's the nice part about they're really making it easier and easier to apply these things. And I'm really looking forward to this one because for me, the thing that I was charged with is taking a look at the new cache helper integration. So of course, .NET Core had the cache tag, and but there was no integration with cache dependencies within Kentico. So now that we have that, both with widget and with just normal stuff, I rigged up a little script to see the before and after using the baseline. So it's the exact same site, just with caching.
Nice.
And I'm seeing like going from like 18 millisecond responses to 7 in some cases, or 25 to 15. So, I mean, it's still really fast because it's .NET Core and stuff, and it's a simple site, but those are some pretty good gains. So I'm really thrilled about this.
Yeah, I think to your point, Chris, what people should know about the refresh is it's meant to be this method that Kentico can frequently or the experience team can frequently just kind of update the product and the platform over time and not have the pains that we had before of giant separate installation and all this breaking changes and these things you have to watch out for. It's really meant to be, like Trevor mentioned, just about as simple as a hotfix. It should be easy. It shouldn't really be breaking changes. And it's something that they can do on a much faster basis to allow more innovation on the project, to get features out there faster. And it's cumulative, right? So you don't have to worry about all the tiny little hotfixes before the refresh. If you get to refresh 1, you have the latest and greatest with all those things included, which is actually the .NET 5 support is one of the big ones. And then some of the other media library fixes that they've done in the hotfixes are there too. So it's really, it should be very familiar if you've worked with Experience before.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I love hearing this. This is something we've been working towards for over 6 months now, is to get us onto this space. Even before we launched Experience, there was the talk of we want to move faster with our releases. We don't want to wait the 12 to 18 months anymore. We don't want to do that. We want to be agile in our process. We want to get the features to you faster, get the feedback faster. That's the other thing. The faster we get the features to you, the more feedback we get on where do we need to go next, what needs to be in the next refresh or the refresh after that. Where can we improve, all that kind of stuff. So this much faster release cycle is going to put a little bit more stress on the dev teams, but at the end of the day, the product is going to end up winning out, as well as the clients and the customers that are using it.
Yeah, and Ryan, I mean, I wonder, would it be beneficial to tell people, like, if they have feedback on refresh 1 or just generally on the platform, where's your advice to people to maybe get that feedback to the right channels quickly?
So obviously our community Slack is definitely the place to get the most direct feedback and almost the quickest feedback, because at that point, you're not just reaching out to Kentico, but you're reaching out to the MVP community as well. So you have access to all these individuals right here. I know Chris is into that community as well, and you can get questions answered there. Whenever we see those and we can't get those answered, that's the beautiful thing. I'm in there. These guys, these MVPs are in there. We'll take it back and we'll take it to the product teams and see if we can't get that answer that way. If there is a feature that you want to be added or that you think is very important, the product board is the place to add that feature. It's also a place to see kind of what we have in the pipeline to what we're going to be working on. And it's also your place to vote. You get that voice. Your voice is now matters to us, and we want your opinions and your votes on the features we think need to be done. I will say we had one of those. We had one feature that an MVP really wanted, and that MVP went out and he pushed hard to get his friends and his peers in there to vote for that feature. And guess what? That feature is coming in refresh 1. So this is truly a community-driven board. Not only is it insight into where we're looking, but also it's our insight into what you want.
And if you guys need to know how to get there, just go to experience.io, and under product, there's the roadmap, and that has a link to the roadmap. That is the community board that you can actually take a look at which features are being considered, which are planned, which are in development, which have launched. So it's real easy to use. There's a whole bunch of that are already in development, which is awesome to see, and still some that are recommended, so they're under consideration. I just submitted one yesterday on that. So definitely leverage it, guys.
And I'm trying to see, and I'm going to show you that right now. If I can get my board here to work.
Yeah, I think, while Ryan's doing that, the thing that I appreciate about the community aspect is that it's not just tossing an idea in a black hole. It's not something that is never looked at. The Kentico product team actually does look at it. They take it internally, they vote, they have a process. And then they reach back out to people and they say that, hey, yeah, this is actually going to happen. But what about this aspect of it? In the past, when we were working on email builder improvements in previous versions, they reached back out to us as a group and said, hey, there's a couple scenarios where we're not sure what you want. So it is really a two-way thing. And that's what I appreciate about working with the experienced team.
All right. And of course, it opens that in a new tab. Which I only shared a tab. Let's fix that right there. There we go. Now we're at the product board. So there you go. We talked about the product board. Here is what is, you can say, well, this is what we're working on in Experience 13 right now, and this is your refresh 1 coming at you. Also, you can see we have the next I don't want to say version because this is the end of versioning with our Odyssey for Kentico Experience. So this is the next generation of Kentico Experience we're calling Odyssey, which is a full .NET Core solution, which means no more web forms, no more locking you into Windows for the entire administration side, admin tool. So, and it's going to have the same fast release cycles like we have here with 13 and these refreshes, maybe also a little bit quicker as well. We'll see how we can get the dev teams flowing on this, but right now there's parallel development going on. So 13 is not going away, not going by the wayside. We're still working on it and pushing it and going to make it better. All the while we're working on this other the vNext version for Odyssey. And here, like I said, you can see these votes right here are people who are saying, hey, we want this. So we look at the binder integration. Several people, you have a chance to say this is a nice to have feature, this is important, or this is critical for us to do our business. So, and I will throw this into the chat here. Like I said, go ask. If you got questions about this stuff, throw them into the chat room. Let us know. Let us know what you're looking forward to. I'm curious. What are some of the things that you on this list you're like saying, "Oh, I can't wait to have that." Chat room. Let us know. All right. Let's do that, and let's go into our next one. So Sean produced a new article for us this past week, I think, is when it was released, but it's called Modeling Missing Data in Nullable Reference Type. So Sean has been doing an article series called Kentico Experience Design Patterns. And so if you have not seen that on Dev2, go out and check it out because he's got a lot of knowledge he's laying on us.
I don't know about a lot of knowledge, but I have a lot to say.
Yeah. I'm impressed that you have that much time to say all that, man. It's amazing.
You can find the time. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
You just have to be able to type really fast, right? Stream of consciousness. Yeah, really, anytime that I'm writing a blog post, it's not me, sitting in some ivory tower theorizing about an idea. This is the thing I did yesterday, really. And I imagine that's the case for most experienced developers is we're working on a site, we're working on a build or a project, and you tried something and it didn't work well, or you tried something and it worked great, and now you know something new, and that can happen over the course of a couple hours. And for me, each time that happens and I feel like the thing that I learned was valuable, I write up a blog post. And that's exactly where this came from. We have a lot of projects where the page types that we're creating that model the content that is going to be the source of information for the site, some of those page types have optional fields. Other times, maybe the field isn't optional, but we have an integration on the back end. And sometimes that data comes in and there's a piece missing. And we don't want to fail everything if that data is missing, but we want to handle that situation gracefully. And this blog post is about how we can make sure not only that the page type models the content in the site, but so that our code models the content as well. Once you have that page type, you have strongly typed C# that you have access to string and Boolean and file fields and GUIDs and all this stuff. And then you need to get that into a Razor view to display it to the user. And when you're coding all this up, you want to make sure that the C# classes that you're creating and the properties you're creating that hold this data really represent what you expect that data, the shape to be in. So if you do have an optional field, how do you handle that? How do you show that in the Razor view, this thing is sometimes there and sometimes not? And if it's not there, that's okay. Don't throw an exception. Don't show an error. Just treat it as this thing's missing. And in this blog post, I show that nullable reference types in C# 8, also available in C# 9, these are one way to model this missing or optional data. And I show how you step-by-step transform from maybe a traditional approach with a couple of view model classes and getting data out of experience and moving that to using nullable reference types. And then I talk about some of the pros and cons of relying on nullable reference types for this type of content modeling or code modeling, and then lead into my next couple of posts, which are going to be about other patterns that we can use in combination with nullable reference types to help model missing or optional data in our applications. And the whole goal of this is to make sure that we don't end up with like a null reference exception or the application crashing or the page failing to display anything when it's running in production. We want to avoid that as much as possible. And you don't want to have to write 1,000 if null, try catch statements all over the place, because then your code becomes hard to read and hard to maintain. So hopefully these patterns should allow us to write readable, maintainable code that also guards against these scenarios, or if the case is that the data is actually optional, not guards against it, but handles that correctly and expresses that in the code.
And another thing that's kind of tricky with by default, when you generate your info classes or your page type classes, there is no generated nullable references that Kentico provides. Like if it's an integer field, it in the backend has a default value, so it would be usually 0. So you can't tell the difference between a null and an actual 0 in the database unless you do a get value on it and actually get the database value back. So that's awesome, that functionality there, because I run into that situation a lot as well.
Yeah, and the experience docs talk about that exact scenario that Trevor mentioned, where the page type code that you generate does not take into account things like nullability, even though the database does. And it goes through some steps of how you could handle that. There's some pros and cons about doing that approach, handling it at the page type level. But there's other situations where, say, we have a node GUID field in a page type, and that references another page in the content tree. And if you go and get that data out of a page type instance and there is no value entered, you're not going to get null. You're going to get the default value for a GUID, which is going to be an empty GUID. However, that's still informative to us, and we can treat that as a specific situation and do something correctly based on that information. And I think that it's going to tend to be it's a combination of the page type class, which at least at the time being does not completely model the content the way we would like it to, if you're auto generating it, and taking that with the view model class or any of your domain classes that model content and combining those all together, and that becomes the representation of that content coming from external sources or the database inside the core of your application.
Sean, out of curiosity, is there a performance benefit or impact? Both sides of it when using this approach that you gain or you need to watch out for?
So there can be some benefits. One of them that I've noticed is that if you are modeling missing data intentionally, then you can write code that intentionally doesn't perform additional operations when that data is missing. You kind of say, I know this thing isn't here, I'm going to stop. So an example would be, let's say you have a reference to another page, and normally you would go fetch that page when you find a value. If the value is, the GUID value is default, then you wouldn't perform the operation of querying the database again. So you can actually pick up, definite performance improvements by cutting off execution of whole pathways through your code. And the only way you can do that consistently and correctly is if the way you write your classes and the way you model the information in the database with your code is intentional and clear. And nullable reference types help with that.
Yeah, I like it. Instead of like relying on the database to tell you that there's nothing know ahead of time, and you're skipping that whole round trip. Yeah.
Yep.
See, and that's awesome. And I want to point out also, while we say this in terms of using it with experience, these design patterns aren't just focused on experience. no matter what kind of site you're working on or what kind of application you're building, these patterns can be applicable. Again, we put this in terms of experience, but this is making it every developer better in the way they code. All right. Moving on, we have another series of blog posts by our own Brian McKeever here in the chat. And it's 25 reasons to move to Kentico Experience. Now, Brian, what was your inspiration for writing this series of articles? And in our chat, I'm gonna post a link to the DevNet article you did that actually kind of summarizes them and then provides links to each one.
Sure. Well, you know how we have that pattern in our coding framework that says keep it simple or stop repeating yourself, don't repeat yourself over and over and over. Well, for the last 2 years, that's kind of how I felt I was in this area. I was explaining the reasons to move from Portal Engine to MVC again and again to different clients, right? And some of these clients are very well versed in experience, some aren't. Some are very well versed in technology, some aren't. Sometimes it wasn't even a technical person in the room. It was a business executive or a marketing director that I'm speaking to. And I started to, have this thing in the back of my mind of, I keep saying the same things over and over, but I forget to write it in one place. So I finally had the motivation and the time to sit down. It took about a weekend, and I wrote a whole bunch of words that really I tried to hit it from all the angles I could think of to give one list of all the benefits, all the things that matter to anyone who's considering the move, to help them decide and to help them kind of reaffirm that, yes, it is not like a push of a button upgrade, and there is a lot of work involved. And this can be big decisions that you have to make to jump a generation of technology. And that's what Experience 13 gives us now. We're finally ready for that with 13 MVC support in .NET Core, especially. It's this great time in the usage of Kentico Experience to kind of move on. And that is great from a technical standpoint. Everyone in this room probably understands the technical reasons. But if you're someone who's not technical and you have a website project that you've been running Kentico since maybe version 7 or 8, hopefully not much sooner than that, even maybe version 11, and you've heard the messaging that says the Portal Engine has an end of life. It's coming. It's not too far away. And maybe you've got a large site or even a medium size site that you need to figure out what to do. And you're going to have this discussion with your stakeholders, your executive committee, your board members of, hey, it's time to invest in the next generation of your web property. And I'm trying to give you that ammo to have those discussions the same way that I do and have all the insight possible. And these are topics that I've talked about with, the guys on this call. I've talked with other developers. I've talked with a lot of people. And now I have one place that I can reference and say, hey, you have a question about Portal Engine MVC? Go check out this documentation. And there's 25 good reasons. And I tried to capture them all. There's probably more. So I would say, in a setting like this, on this chat or on Twitter, if there's other great reasons that you are thinking of, please let me know, and we'll make it 26 reasons or 27 reasons. I'd love to make this list even more. And I hope that everyone who's read it has enjoyed it, because that's my goal, is to provide some value to the community.
And I'll say that, we've had experience in 12 and now 13, and more sites are starting to move over from Portal Engine to MVC and MVC.NET Core and stuff like that. And we're starting to, there's going to be some resources coming out that help make that transition easier and easier as we move more clients over. One of my other devs just created a script to be able to convert one page type to another, which has always been a huge issue, to go from one page type that may be a page type to a content only, which is what's used predominantly in MVC. And he's got where you can configure it. So we're working on, polishing that up and presenting that to the community as well, to help make some of these transitions. And I know some people have already posted some ways to get widgets from Portal Engine to MVC in terms of converting things over. So we're trying to work on some of those things as well to make that transition easier. Because I know when it started out, it's okay, dude, we're just going to have to leave the old and completely rebuild the new, which sometimes is the best way to do it. But we are working on some of those transition processes. So from a community standpoint, you'll have some more support and more help as well to make that transition better.
Awesome. Chris, I know you have some opinions on this. I know I've seen a little bit of some of the stuff your opinions on it, and I'd love to hear what you're seeing from your side in your agency at Wakeful.
Yeah, so we have, a lot of our clients are still using, because we have a lot of older versions of experience. So we have, even as far back as like, version 8, 9, so we're slowly building up, our base of new clients and upgrades who, use the MVC model and now we're working on our first experience 13 site. But I would say that it's I don't know. It's just I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. Can we?
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
It's been challenging, right?
Yeah.
The first site is always extremely
Yeah.
challenging when you're so used to Portal Engine.
And it's different having to be like, okay, yes, we know that you won't have at the beginning all the same components that you're used to. You're used to having, you as the client are used to having, your repeaters and your, higher transformations and being able to, go into the CMS and build out a ton of things. But when we start showing them, okay, here's what we can do with MVC, and here is how we can actually, more easily set up pipelines to deploy this. Here's how we continue to have support in the future. That's really where I think we sell them on it. And, they're like, okay, yes, we see that. Sure, we'll need to build a little more than we did before, but.
So let me ask you a couple questions, because we've been, we as the MVPs have been, in MVC since 12. We're the ones that need to be the pioneers that need to, test these things. We're testing betas and everything like that. So we are probably like a year, 2 years removed from our initial shock of, we don't have a repeater anymore. We don't have these things anymore. So what are some of the things that, now that you're getting into it and starting to get used to a little bit, what are some of the key components that you really, really miss from the Portal Engine days? Because those might be things that we want to look at or refresh and look at an idea of, hey, this functionality was sorely missed. There's not a good comparison. Do you have anything like that you'd say, like, I really wish that this was still there?
It's funny, not that is very hard to rebuild. Like, a lot of our customers are like, wait, there's no blog anymore, and we're like, don't worry, we can build you a blog. It's easy. But that's definitely one where I find that everybody wants a blog on their site, and everybody wants it to auto go down by month and year. Everybody wants to be able to drop forms. And I find that the forms are one area where we're struggling a little bit with having it, so that we can put it both in page builder regions and not page builder. I think you and I have actually talked over that, and we've got it working. But
yeah, we definitely have run into that issue as well. And I think one of our other MVPs wasn't it you, Sean, that was working in the forums? Like, this is really kind of not well polished yet.
Yeah, just recently, we've actually not done much with forms since 12. A lot of our clients rely on forms from external systems, and we drop them in the page, and that handles the use case. We're working on a site right now where the current Kentico, I think it's Kentico 11, maybe it's 10, version of the site has a lot of forms in it. And they are not moving to some external system. They want to use Kentico Experience's built-in forms. So we are building out forms, and we're trying to match the parity of features with what you can do with forms in Portal Engine, in Experience, in MVC. And yeah, there were some areas where I noticed things were much easier in Portal Engine. At the same time, there are other areas where I've noticed, oh my goodness, this is something we fought again and again. And actually, just the other day, we were talking in our company's chat about a site with a form and something with an uploader, and it's like we can't get around this. We want this to work a certain way, and we just can't because of the web forms stuff that all of it's built on. And with MVC, that problem just does not exist. So I found it's a toss up. And I think that as these refreshes come out, it's going to get better, especially so I'm building out these forms right now. And I had to build out multiple form sections. When we get form section properties, that'll be one form.
That's in the plan section. If you go to the roadmap, and that's one I really push for, because we had the Bootstrap layout tool for the page builder that you can configure things. I'm like, if we had a configurable form section with properties, at least you could wrap things in CSS. You could do your structure a little bit easier and get those type of things going. So I think once that comes out, which will probably be refreshed too, since it's already in the plan phase, then I hope that's going to make forms a lot easier, because you can do a lot of stuff with actual just flat out CSS. Put a wrapper around it and do that. So I agree, though, the forms engine, I kind of miss the days where you could actually completely control the HTML structure of the form, because we did that a lot with clients. So that's a good observation, and they have definitely heard, and we've definitely put up, like I said, a tout saying, hey, this is kind of difficult.
Yeah, I think that it's really the content development experience there. There's some pieces missing, and I love Page Builder. I think it's a fantastic pattern and architecture for building out reusable pieces that have enough flexibility so that content managers and site builders can create their pages and stay within the constraints that you lay down for them, so that the site just works no matter what combinations of things they use. The page builder works fantastic for that. What I'd like to see is the form builder to get closer to feature parity with the page builder. For me, they serve kind of the same role. Yeah, the form builder is specific to forms, but being able to drag and drop things and just have it work, that's the content management experience you want. For the developer experience, I want to have similar paradigms for how I create these reusable pieces. So yeah, I think it's going to get better. Right now, there are some areas where, again, some things are better in Portal Engine and some things are better in MVC, and it's going to depend on your project and your forms as to how that plays out for you. That said, I don't think there's been anything that I've had to do that I haven't been able to do. It just requires a bit of turning your brain sideways and maybe using part of the API in a way that it's not intended to, but it works. And so, yeah, we're building out our forms.
And keep in mind that right now the other thing that's been recommended for forms is widgets, as Sean said, to get that same similarity. It's not up there because I'm hoping that we can do it with the page builder sections, because usually I want to put a header here. I just want to put a block of text. So you can at least do that with a property in a form builder section that maybe has a HTML before and after or a header. So you can do a lot of that type of stuff. And I'm hoping that's going to solve most of the issues with it. We'll see. But it would be kind of nice to be able to have some sort of widget functionality to go within the form. I'm not sure how easy or hard that is, though. So I agree there. Does anyone else have one of my other devs, and I want to get your opinion on this, Chris. Have you run into with CSS where it's nice to be able to make quick modifications? Is that also a pain point for you?
So we really never used the in CMS CSS editor. Yeah, we've pretty much always used Gulp, but mainly just because we didn't like the concept of pushing not being able to push all that stuff to source control without doing a lot of using the CI and things like that. So right now, I'm just using the built into Visual Studio CSS combiner and minifier, but we're going to be switching to using Gulp based pretty soon, and then we're going to build that into the starter so that we can use that going forward.
All right, I ask because I know one of the guys that's not a developer but more the content editor. It's like I just want to add a class and a style for the specific thing without having to do a push in code. So I was just seeing. I guess we're alone on that one. I might still be something that I
Still like
rebuild
the
in there.
idea, but it's also the separation of like being separation
Yeah,
of
you pull
the
back
code
into that.
versus
There's I feel like the road to hell is paved in little in production modifications to the site. And Portal Engine, you didn't have to do that, but it sure led you down that path with on a very
I'll say one thing we did do a lot was putting the CSS and stuff like that in app themes, so that when you go in, you're still modifying it, and it's obvious that you're modifying files. Whereas with the Portal Engine, it was a little less obvious that you were actually modifying, whether you were modifying files or just in the database. And so then having something to pull that and push it to a branch that was, hey, this got modified. Devs, do you actually want that in source control, or do you want to go talk to the client? And that was a good way of keeping it. It would be nice if that was built in, like have it.
Well, and then what we do is even separate than what you guys are speaking of. We break out our front end project into its own project altogether, and our front end team can use React or npm commands to build, deploy, and inject the project into the MVC Live site, and they like that because they're using tools that they're used to. They're using Rollup, they're using the Webpack server, and they don't need to know anything about Kentico, yet they're designing the forms. They're getting the CSS working. It's in one place that they know how to work. They're using VS Code, and that's a much faster development style for them that they like, and I have to have less fights about this is the Kentico way of doing it versus general web development. So we really try to separate very clearly and cleanly away from any of that stuff in the CMS.
You can set up your experience application so that people that are used to front end tooling can use VS Code, have a Webpack dev server proxy back to experience, which if you don't want to host or you don't want them to have to run the ASP.NET Core application locally, you could put that in on a shared server or in Azure or something like that. And they can proxy back to that so that they could see the same things that you would if you were running that ASP.NET Core application and be able to develop with their front-end tools. The way we have it set up is for any ASP.NET Core things, we use Visual Studio because it's got the best tooling for that experience. And running the application out of Visual Studio, it just works, right? You open it up, Control F5, your site's running. However,
go ahead.
I was going to say that we also open up the repository at the root level with VS Code, and we have all of the extensions and all of the workspace settings for VS Code configured so that it works from the root level, even though all the npm packages and everything are installed in the MVC application, which is nested down a couple levels. So VS Code is flexible enough to let you work with all the .NET, C#, ASP.NET Core things there, even though your focus is on building a React application or React components that you're dropping in the site. And we like that because it lets us have it's basically a mono repo, which people talk a lot about these days. .NET has always been mono repo focused, and that lets you ensure that any changes you make work with the whole and that things are deployed together. And yeah, sometimes maybe you're just making a change to some JavaScript and you don't need to deploy the whole application. But having everything go through that CI/CD pipeline, build your client-side application, your client-side components, install npm packages, make sure your package lock is correctly configured with your package JSON package versions, and all this stuff. I like having all that together, using the right tooling in the right places for the right developers, but having all that stuff together so that we have confidence that the thing that we are shipping to production all plays nicely together.
And I'll say that, especially with DevOps, that makes it really simple. If anyone, and I haven't written the article on this yet, one of my kind of future to-do things is to actually kind of show the different, usually the YAML files that actually do the build and then the deployment steps. We've done it in every single way you can imagine, on-prem, VM, through Plus, Azure Web Apps, all these different ways that we've done it. So we have like a plethora of scripts that if any guys need any of that before I actually get a chance to publish it, hit me up on Slack and I can definitely guide you through on here's, what we have for the build. This will build it and package it. Here's what we do for releases in your scenario. Using dev slots to swap it out to get instant, all these different things. So that's something that I know a lot of people are looking to do. And with .NET Core, it definitely gets easier. Admin is still a nightmare a little bit. Well, not a nightmare, but it's not as easy to push because it's so large to get up. But the MVC is very quick to push and deploy and build and everything. So that is definitely something that a lot of people are trying to figure out. And if you haven't yet, send me a line. I can at least guide you on what we do to help get that process going.
Chris, were there any things that you really like about experience and working in ASP.NET Core and anything that's bringing along to your developer process?
Oh, yeah. So the pipeline stuff is certainly easier. Being able to just be like, okay, here are the outer DLLs. Everything in this W root is the stuff that we actually give, file permissions for. And to deploy, we just push that DLL. All the views are in there. All the that's just .NET Core. That's not like Kentico specific or experience specific, but that is a really nice thing. And the fact that it gives you a lot, on the one hand, it means you have to know a lot more about stuff when you're first installing the site. I find it's always enlightening to get a project that we're inheriting from another client. We recently inherited one that they didn't obviously know about dynamic URLs and anything because they were just using controller name / page GUID / here's a sting at the end for a friendly name. But we basically had to go do you guys realize what this is doing for your SEO? Do you want friendly names? Because we can do that. It's not hard. And, they start trying to use the online marketing features and we're like, no, hang on. We have to go enable that in code. So, but the fact that the documentation makes it really easy once you know that it's there to just go in and be like, I'm going to enable these things. And I would say that the debugging experience is actually somewhat easier in it because it's so separated. You don't have to worry about, okay, is this a problem in the admin or is this a problem with the install?
Wait, you don't want to step through 7 layers of the web part base class that inherits the base class and inherits the base class.
Hey, I have fond memories of that, Brian. Don't
so do I, but I want to forget them.
Think of every layer of inheritance as a warm blanket wrapping you up, constraining you and suffocating you.
Yep.
So I want to say you've got a friend in the chat room, Leon Goldfinch. He is he doesn't like that GUID in the URLs as well. So
we're sharing you. We just inherited one client that is Portal Engine, but they still have .aspx everywhere. I'm like, you can change that, right? Even in Portal Engine, you don't have to have .aspx in every page. I'm like, oh boy. And of course, then I change it and things break because they actually have URL pattern checking and they try to strip the ASPX or find the part before that. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So anyways,
but yeah, that's one thing I think that's, like I was saying, it's interesting grabbing projects from other teams that haven't already learned those lessons or have learned lessons that we can incorporate. they on the other hand did have a completely separate section in the CMS tree where they were putting things like navigation and filters and things that aren't pages, but that they still wanted to be able to edit. And I was like, yes, that's the right way to do that. Well done.
I think we all learn from each other. With another client, I'm kind of taking Brian's approach more. We're saying, hey, content editors like having everything in the content tree and just drag sections around. So we're doing a mixture of that with relationships for one client, just to make it a little bit easier and more concise with, because they had just widget zones and here's all the widgets you need to make this page look the same way. Make sure you put them in the right order. And, it's pretty bad. Hey, Chris, I have a question as well. I know that, and I hope this is not too not touting our own horn. What's the word I'm looking for? Too shameless plugin like. But of course, I helped Chris set up the baseline to get himself started, which is available on HBS Tech's GitHub. That allows you to get started and get going a little bit faster. Has that been a positive experience for you, Chris? Has that helped?
Oh yeah, definitely. It got me a lot of, it's got this site running right out of the gate, which is kind of, more of a thing than it should be. But just being able to load it up and be like, okay, other than the obvious needing to install the hosting environment and things like that, loading it up and just being like, yes, there is a front page and there is an admin interface. And, a lot of the features that I would be going in and enabling anyway are there and just working.
Awesome.
Was really great.
I highly encourage, you can use the baseline that we created at HBS Tech and fork it. You can make your own, but if you are a actual software, a Kentico experience partner that you're building these for people, definitely encourage you to create your own baseline and have those things put together, because like I said, there's Dancing Goat, which has, an example of every different thing, but it's all joined together. So you really don't want to start with Dancing Goat. You have the starter site, which really has nothing, not even things turned on really well. They did a better job on 13 where they actually just had it commented out so you can uncomment it, which is awesome. Kentico 12, it gave you nothing. And then there's, some other examples for how to do things, but there's really no here's a blank site. You have a homepage, you have the basic functionality. Now you can extend that and make it your own. So at some point, we're going to have another video series up on the Experience YouTube channel on getting started with Experience 13 that goes through the whole installation, host setup, and then at the end, it'll show you if you want to use the baseline, how to set that up, which I know is still working through there. So keep an eye out for that and make sure to subscribe to the Experience YouTube channel to catch videos and stuff like that. And that way it can kind of guide you through if you're still getting started up with Experience 13.
Yeah, I'll say the big things we changed from that repo ourselves so far are just modifying the git ignore to show and hide some different things that we care about storing in there, and also publish profiles. It's one thing that we really want in our projects is not to be having a single settings that we have to swap out. So using the transformations. And I made kind of a variant of that for the front end project, or the front end project, where we're using the JSON files, and we're using local development and production versions of those.
Yep. Sweet. And what they're talking about, of course. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, yeah, and Trevor, it's a fantastic contribution to the community. But what I want to tell people is a lot of the stuff that's in the starting steps of an MVC.NET Core site are critically important to understand. So I wouldn't necessarily shy away from starting a blank project, .NET Core CLI or even Studio or whatever, to understand the startup and the pipelines and the dependencies that you're adding to your app. And then have both sides of it. Trevor's tool is a great baseline, but knowing the stuff in the middle, and I think Sean has a great blog post on understanding startup and cleaning it up and making sure it's simple. So I equate this to the old global ASAX.cs stuff that was in .NET Web Forms, what happened in there and some of the early request pipeline stages was a mystery to most people. Most people avoided it. Lifecycle, oh, I don't want to touch any of that. Don't take that approach to startup and the middleware, because understanding that is key to making sure that your site will perform in the real world. So my advice is just make sure you don't skip it and ignore the basics of what you're doing in those first few steps.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. And like I said, my baseline site is not the end all be all. I didn't get a chance to incorporate a lot of Sean's awesome design patterns, which I wish I had the time to do. So there's a lot of things that Sean is supposed to, especially with his like query engines and stuff, that I think are a much better design and much smoother process in the future and stuff like that. But this was more to keep things in line that those that use the baseline in 12 could upgrade easy to 13 and stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely. But
yeah,
yeah,
one thing I'd like to see a little more guidance on in maybe a future experience patch is just like where to put, like, and I know it's an individual developer decision, but like when you generate code files, it just hands you the 3 files, and it's like, well, what do I do with these? And I put them like in a separate library under like a generated folder, so that anyone who comes along in the future realizes, oh, these are all things that are generated, and okay, here are the extensions to that somewhere else. But it's still a little obscure when you first look at it. Like, there's 3 different files. Do I just put them all together, or should I split them out? And obviously it works either way, but
yeah, we've had a lot of internal discussions, and I've confirmed with Sean on this a lot. Sean's my go-to guy for design patterns, obviously. So I'm always like, "Hey, Sean, what should we do in this case?" But we're starting to adopt the pattern of where we have our experience libraries in a separate class, and then we're trying to move to having that. Then we have a class that is our DTO, our data transfer objects, that are all agnostic. And then, we have also an API layer that's going to have the DTO has the interfaces. And then we have one more layer that hooks up those interfaces with Kentico. So we have the Kentico objects, we have the interfaces, the DTOs, and then all that filters down. So ultimately, our actual MVC site uses very minimalistic Kentico integration. It's as agnostic as possible. Now, you can't completely separate. You have your page builder stuff and all these other things that are part of it, but at least the stuff that isn't the page builder engine, you can really separate a lot of that out. Makes it a lot easier to test with and things like that. So we're trying to adopt that more model now that it's very easy to do builds and all the rest, and try to get into that better design pattern. So check Sean's articles for all that stuff, though.
That touches on a really interesting topic that I'd like to get some thoughts on from you, Chris. And that's that my impression, and I have a bit of a background in outside of Kentico. I did lots of stuff with straight .NET, ASP.NET, client-side frameworks. And so for me, my perspective was that Kentico development was a lot of point and click and type in a box and configure. And you could do a lot with that. Very powerful, very impressive, the portal engine technology. Now, Kentico developers are becoming Kentico experience developers, writing ASP.NET Core code, writing .NET code, because on the content delivery side, nothing's built for you. You have to build that. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what has been the experience of moving from using the portal engine to build out a site without coding to having to become a developer deep in the weeds and doing architecture?
I'll say that we never really had that dream quite as much as we've worked on sites so that were complex enough that pretty much every site had something, but a lot of the coding was transformations. A lot of the, like, it's still coding, but it's within the CMS. And so you can do it a little more like immediate. You type something in, you click OK, the page refreshes, and there's the change. and having the visual Kentico like suggesting macros and things like that. Whereas that doesn't really exist in the MVC version, where you have IntelliSense, but there's not like macro suggestions. There's not syntax highlighting for Kentico features. So I would say that for our team, it's been slow, especially because we're not just suddenly working on MVC. We still have like a large proportion of Portal Engine clients. So we're really having to hire people and tell them, you're a developer, you're going to work on these various sites, but you're going to be working in these two very different paradigms depending on what client you're working with that day.
Yeah,
And
we're running into that a lot too.
And I think that's where it gets tricky. Like, not so much how do we work under an MVC.NET Core paradigm, but how do we context switch constantly between the two?
Yeah,
So
I agree. That's difficult.
I think that's a good question to answer. How has I think we heard a little bit from Trevor just a second ago, but how has your company made that switch? How have they taken their developers and said, "Hey, I know you're good at Portal Engine. You've been doing it, but we're switching. We're going to this new MVC side."
I wouldn't even say we're switching as
Seniority
much
gets
as
MVC.
expanding.
Yeah.
No, and like I said, for us, because we have 8, 9, 10 developers, whatnot, and I'd say right now, 90 to 95% still Portal Engine, and some of our bigger clients are still Portal Engine that have huge instances. Now they're starting to make the switch. We're starting to build more in that, and the hard part is that I've have experience now with 12 MVC and 13. One of my other developers were able to pull in and say, okay, now it's your turn to do an MVC site, and so they get a chance to learn it and do it. But almost every developer needs to have like a project that they are building out the .NET Core site and doing that to get them familiar with it. Like,
that's exactly what we're doing.
Teach it. So it's like hard because like, okay, we have another site coming up. Now it's the next new persons to work on it with guidance and stuff. So that's what we've been running into, is just, it's really hard to get a full team migrated over because you almost need a new project with each one. And we are very old client heavy. So, we're not getting as many new site acquisitions because we're so busy with maintaining the old ones right now. So we're getting some, but we only had one .NET Core site. And I think we have like 5 MVC sites and 12. And the rest are all Portal Engine. So I'm not sure if Chris is shaking his head, so I think it's the same thing. But I mean, in a deal where like, can we get some more of these .NET Core sites? I would love to spend more time doing this because I'm starting to really enjoy it more and more.
And on the other hand, you have the fact that like, once someone is ramped up, you sort of want them to be the one to continue working on it.
Yep.
And so it's almost like we're kind of, as we get more proportion of MVC projects, we're like, okay, well, the 3 who are already doing MVC are already on 3 projects. Now that we need the 4th, to ramp up, because now we're going to have 4 at a time.
Well, I can tell you guys, a great resource to ramp up the developers, like how they move, is the new training that's out that Experience just put out, the learning team and the training team. It's redone. It's actually being constantly updated. I think it was updated even again this week with another push. And Jan and the team over there have done a fantastic job with actually basically splitting the line of like, this isn't like a sample. This is more like a real world how to do it. And there's GitHub repositories, there's code, there's documentation to read. So I really recommend people checking out that Experience 13 training because it goes into .NET Core.
And I'm pretty sure if you are a partner, you get the training for free for as many seats as you need, I think. Depending on your level. I could be wrong on that. I have to check it. There's something with that, though. I have to, don't quote me on that, but partners have something where they get training seats.
Yes, and so that's the one thing that I will say, if you are your company is partnered and you didn't know about this, go ask your partner rep. Say, hey, how do I get this Kentico training? It is part of it. I had talks with the documentation team about some people's access to this training, and they're like, well, if they're a partner, they've already got it. And so there's that gap there. Make sure go ask your partner rep and say, hey, what do we actually get with Kentico when we are a partner, and find out what you're missing.
Yep. And I brought up the partner portal so I don't misquote. It is even if you're a bronze member, your employees can take this course for free. Your clients, if they want to take it, there's a discount if you're a partner and stuff like that. I won't get into the weeds, but yeah, it's free for if you are at least a bronze partner.
Yep. Hey, Brian, I have a question. How has your team handled the transition from Portal Engine to MVC? Do you have split devs? Do you have devs that are solely Portal Engine and solely MVC, or are they starting to meld together?
I have a lot of devs that want to be solely MVC and solely .NET Core and solely work on the new shiny thing. They all have background in Kentico, and that's one thing that you're never going to completely let go of. There is still things in the admin tool like email templates that rely on the standard Kentico knowledge of the CMS, right? So basically they're split. They're doing both things. They're equally versed. But the trend that we're seeing over the last couple of years, because we've been doing MVC for like 3-4 years now, is that more and more of it is MVC. More and more of it is page builder development, form builder development, understanding the new tools that are available since 12 and SP1 and 13 and Refresh 1. So I think the background knowledge actually helps to be there. So I don't mind them knowing a little bit of it. But we are doing a lot less portal than before, just because that's where the world is going. New projects that have started the last year or two really only start in MVC, and we have, I would say, very few people who've never touched an MVC site, and maybe this because we've been doing it for a while. But originally, a couple of years ago, if you would have asked me that question, I would have said we have a very team approach, and we make sure that on the team there was at least one MVC champion. And they were bringing along the developers with no MVC experience, a little bit like what Chris and Trevor mentioned, is like kind of now we're bringing you onto the MVC side. Now we're bringing you, but we would never just throw 3 Portal Engine developers right at a brand new MVC side on their own. It always was a mentorship thing. It was having a champion there, having someone who's done it before, bringing the next person up to speed. And now that's kind of through the organization here. So now it's about how do we leverage the newest features more than how do we do MVC. But it takes time. I'm not going to lie. There's a learning curve. Like Sean mentioned, it is a lot less configure the CMS and change a web part and a path property or whatever. And it's a lot more knowing the standards of what .NET Core does. But honestly, that's helped us hire more people because we can find those people. You can't find people who know Portal Engine. You just can't.
And I'll echo as well in terms of getting the new features. We have people that got trained up in Kentico 12, Experience 12 MVC, and now there's the next paradigm shift. And I'll say that paradigm shift has not been too bad. So if you are, if you've done some, Experience 12 MVC sites, I would encourage you to look to upgrade those clients to 13 and get them on the latest grace, because it really isn't too hard of a transition. I've done a couple sites already upgrading from MVC 12 to 13, and the biggest thing is just your startup configuration. Of course, all changes, so you have to make sure you get your startup going, and then you often have to just do a little bit of tweaking on like your widgets, changing them from action results to view components, and that's pretty much the majority of what that upgrade consists of. So if you're starting like, well, we just got some people knowing MVC and now we have to do MVC.NET Core, relax, it isn't that bad of a transition. A lot of the same paradigms exist. There's a lot of nice new features in .NET Core, like the tag helpers that you can build out and the view components and all the rest. So some might be asking that. I'm not sure if anyone was, but it's throwing out there that I would start moving the transition to 13, even for existing ones. And, at this point, I don't think anyone should be building in 12 MVC at all. No new sites on that. Always make sure they're in the latest and greatest and in .NET Core to make sure you're a little more future-proof and stuff.
I have a recommendation for teams or agencies that are working in both. And like Chris said, an agency isn't switching to MVC. We're going to be maintaining and adding features to Portal Engine sites for years to come. So we are expanding our skill set to include Experience 13, newer versions, MVC, .NET Core. These are becoming additions to our skill sets. We aren't losing the Portal Engine skill sets. And while we are working on both sets of projects, we're not just, with MVC, you aren't just learning MVC, especially today with Experience 13. You're learning .NET Core, .NET 5. You're learning probably modern JavaScript frameworks for client-side development, modern client-side tooling. You're learning maybe DevOps. You're doing CI/CD. Maybe you're doing testing for the first time, automated testing. There's a lot of stuff that comes along with this new world that Experience 13 and ASP.NET Core enables. I would say that can be a lot to bite off all at once. So something that teams can do is bring some of that stuff back to your Portal Engine projects. It's possible. Maybe not MVC, though there is a way, and people have blogged about that. And maybe not .NET Core, but there's other things that we can do. You can bring back CI/CD. It works in Portal Engine. We do it at Wired Views. You can bring back .NET Standard so that you can share code. If you have internal libraries, you can share those between your Experience 13 sites and your Portal Engine Kentico 11 sites if they're in .NET Standard 2.0. You can adopt the .NET CLI for scaffolding out projects if you're using the SDK style CS Proj format. You can adopt new NuGet tooling. You can adopt those client-side frameworks. You can build a React app that lives inside of Portal Engine. We've been doing Angular and Vue integrations with Portal Engine for years. So you can learn some of these new things, have developers work on these things that come along with ASP.NET Core, Experience 13, and use them in Portal Engine. And that way, when you put them on an MVC project, they're learning not everything at once. They're already familiar with a bunch of these things that are going to be part of the solution that you give to a client when you're building a Kentico Experience 13 application.
Totally agree with that. We're doing React in Portal because we want to know React more as we get towards the MVC side. And same with deployments and DevOps and all the rest.
So how much of that do you guys do with projects that, like, clients that already are coming from, you know, other vendors maybe, or they haven't had a vendor and they're now wanting someone to help them build out their site? Do you tend to try and be like, all right, let's rebuild this and, you know, implement these better frameworks, or is it just kind of working with what you're given?
It's definitely a mix of those things. So I would never recommend that you get an existing Portal Engine project from a client and you say, oh, this is all done wrong, I'm going to rebuild the whole thing. You know, that's not going to be something that the client's going to pay for. Your bosses, your managers are not going to appreciate that. And your fellow developers are probably also not going to enjoy that. I would say that there's going to be opportunities with any work on a site. There's the Boy Scout rule, or, you know, clean coding. When you see a problem, if it's something that you're working on, fix that problem. If there is a request for some sort of, I don't know, fancy calendar date picker widget thing in Portal Engine, and the framework Kentico doesn't provide that, adopt some new client-side framework to help you build that thing. Use that as an opportunity to learn something new. And I have a feeling that you'll end up with a better solution for the client than you would if you had maybe used jQuery. And I recently wrote a blog post about using Alpine Js instead of jQuery. There's a small transition you can make. It doesn't require all the tooling and everything that React and Vue and Angular require. Instead, you can use it a lot like jQuery, but you get a lot of benefits that jQuery doesn't bring. It's a tool like jQuery that's built for the modern web. So adopt something like that and bring that into your Portal Engine application for a small part of the project where it makes sense to bring that thing in, and slowly adopt these new patterns, new things that you didn't know before in Portal Engine, so that when you do work on an MVC project, it's fresh in your mind, you're at least familiar with it, and you it's one less thing that you have to check off your list of things I have to learn now that I'm doing Experience 13, MVC, ASP.NET Core. That list becomes a lot smaller and it becomes a lot less overwhelming.
And I'll say, though, that one thing, and I'm going to borrow a quote from Brian here, is every time a new JS platform comes out, the global warming increases by another degree. So I forgot what yours was, but basically, one thing I would recommend against is trying something new with every single project. Because you might run into, okay, this one's using Vue, this one's using React, this one's using this, using that. And if only one developer has experience in it and they leave, now all the other developers like, great, I have to learn 5 new things. So I would definitely encourage, do some research on where you guys want to go. Do a little bit of proof of concepting, whatever, to figure that out. But then start to gain experience as a team in that. One person started out, share that, get another person on. We decided to go with TypeScript and React just because TypeScript is a no-brainer. Like everything uses TypeScript. Like every JavaScript framework out there pretty much uses TypeScript as what it leverages. So that was a no-brainer. And then we decided to go with React because Experience Admin is going to be React. We've done some proof of concepts with it. We like it. It's got some nice features. Your company might want to do Vue instead, so there's no harm or shame in whichever one you pick. But now we built one app in a Portal Engine, like, hey, they need this new functionality. Let's do it in React. And now we have experience. And now, okay, this we're going to do it. Now let's do that in React. And that way, as a team, you start growing in that skill set. But yeah, don't do a scattershot like this we're going to do React, this we're going to do Vue. And then basically everyone has their favorites now and no one wants to work on the other stuff, And the client's like, why is this way? And so, yeah, just be careful with it, but definitely start getting the feelers out. We do have, it's not too hard to actually have the instructions if anyone needs it, on just basically how to get a React app started in even a Portal Engine, like what couple files you need, what couple configs you need just to get the baseline going that builds and your gulp files and stuff. So it's not too terrible to get set up. I think it took me all of 30 minutes once I had the instructions. And then you can be building React apps. And the one that we built for a client, it's now that's all built out. Like it's amazing. It's easy to modify. It works, smoothly. So, it's been a positive experience in that realm versus like all just a bunch of JavaScript everywhere and no TypeScript and, errors all over the place and stuff. So, so that'd be my encouragement is do some research, pick some, and then stick with it,
Yeah, I would say I have to agree. It's you want to make it a team goal. It needs to be a team effort and not just a single developer going in and picking whatever the latest and greatest JavaScript framework is that they want to learn and try. It needs to be something that the team or the company wants to adopt and is going to position them better going forward. Position them a little further out. So I definitely agree with that sentiment that Trevor made, and being able to bring that into existing projects, like Sean said, to leverage and learn that way while still meeting your existing Portal Engine clients' needs is a great thing as well.
Yeah, I guess quickly, I know we're probably a little over time, but I'll add that if you inherit a Portal Engine site and there are best practices that are not being followed, one thing that you can do, not on the front end, like what we've been talking about, on the back end, is your extension, your addition, your enhancement to that site. Develop it in a different class library and add it as a project reference. So it gets into the bin directory. So the thing copies and compiles and all of your code is in this nice little place over here in this project. And if something goes wrong, and the client says, hey, this part of my website doesn't work after you guys touched it, you can take your thing out and you can recreate the same error quickly. And you know that, like, I didn't touch any of this original stuff. My footprint's over here, and it's safely deployable and retractable. And that's a good way to just continually add things. And what you're creating over here, follow best practices. Follow the patterns and practices that are right for MVC5 or Portal Engine or .NET Core, whatever. That's the beauty of the system when it comes to .NET, is you can really isolate your change away and add it in where you need to, but don't put it in the same folders as all the other places that the original Portal Engine framework called for. So that's something that we do all the time, like change the e-commerce functionality. It's custom class. It's in another place. We register it in the assembly, and it just picks it up when it starts up. So you don't have to touch maybe the broken tax calculation or broken shipping calculation that's over in the current stuff that maybe you didn't create originally.
Awesome. Well, Brian, you are right. We are a little bit over on time, but I love these conversations, and I love the different viewpoints and opinions. They make for great conversations. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today out there in the chat room. You know, there were some great things in there. There was one question we didn't get to. We're talking about, SaaS going to replace experience, but I think Liam helped us out there and said it's not going to replace it. It's just another option for using and deploying it. So it's coming. It'll be in the Odyssey, or our codename Odyssey, or the next generation. There we go.
Generation. That's right. What do you call it? Yeah.
Next generation of experience is going to be, like Trevor said, it's going to have React as the admin side. The admin portal is going to be redone. It's going to be using React and ASP.NET Core for the APIs. And then the front end is already in ASP.NET Core, and it'll continue to use ASP.NET Core MVC. And so therefore it'll be much easier to move out there into a more SaaS solution. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the pushing the boundaries of what we can do in terms of making experience the best best DXP platform it can be. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, guests. Thank you, Sean, Chris, Trevor, and Brian, for being here today. I truly appreciate it. We will be back again next month, and we'll have a little bit more coverage of, Refresh 1, what opinions are and everything. And I think we're also going to be talking a little bit about, I'm looking at my calendar here for the next version of it. I think it's content modeling, I think is going to be our next one.
Definitely, if you're in the community, just like Chris, you don't have to be an MVP. It was awesome having you here, Chris. It's nice to getting having good conversations with people that aren't just our collective, hive mind of MVPs and stuff like that. So that was awesome. Glad to have you on board.
And if you want to come join us, you want to get your opinion out there, hit me up. You can hit my Twitter handles there. You can hit me up on Slack, wherever you can find me, LinkedIn. Hit me up, and we'll see about getting you on the show. And I was wrong. The next show is actually going to be over migrating from Portal Engine to MVC. And I know that's something we just talked about a little bit about, having hybrid developers and stuff like that. But the next show, we're going to talk a little bit about, what does it look like when we actually do that migration, and maybe how the projects work when you migrate that stuff. So join us next time. And until then, folks, please enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we'll see you next time.
Take it easy, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.